Today's question is, who controls the opportunists? So if you've watched some of my channels before, you may have heard my guides speak about the opportunists. And the opportunists are an alien group that have chosen to exploit the earth and humanity by turning us into a resource. So, who controls them? Are they at the top of the hierarchy, or is there someone above them? So, today's question is, who controls the opportunists? And I'm going to ask my guides to give a bit of an explanation. So if you're watching what I'm saying here now and you've got no idea what I'm talking about, I'll ask my guides to give a little bit of a sort of a preface. Okay. Right. So who controls the opportunists? Greetings and thank you for the question. Who controls the opportunists? The channel has requested that we provide some preliminary information to create the context for what will follow, so that this makes sense to you. There is two philosophical paths on the way back to the one. One is service to self, and the other is service to others. The service to others philosophical path is about connection to the one. And when you allow this connection, which is eternal, it is your birthright, by virtue of existing as a physical being, you are connected to the one because you are derived from the one. The one has individuated a part of itself and given it identity, given it individuality, so that it can experience itself through that proxy. This is what you are. So you literally are the one. You are always connected to the one. And so the philosophical path of service to others is the recognition of this connection. And by virtue of this connection, realizing that you are connected to all things, because they are all part of this one thing. They are all individuations of the one. And therefore, congruent with this understanding is that you are service to others, because ultimately that is service to self, because all others are you, because you are all individuations of the same thing, which wishes to have a experiential knowledge of itself. The other philosophical path is the denial of the one, which manifests as service to self. When there is service to self, then this is the path of no light, which could be also called the path of darkness, because the path of service to others, which honors the connection to the one and the connectedness of everything into the one ultimate group being, is an honoring of the light, because the light is the energy of the one. If one was to choose, if a person or a being was to choose the opposite philosophical path, which is of service to self, then it is the philosophical path, not of the light, but the philosophical path of denying the light, which is synonymous with saying the path of darkness. Now, the question which begs at this junction is, why would somebody deny their connection to the One and choose the philosophical path of service to self, which is darkness? This choice is made because within the context of the illusion of physicality, because understand there is only one thing. And this one thing existed conceptually only before the existence of physicality. And it yearned to know itself experientially. And so it created infinite individuations of itself. So there was contrast, creating the possibility for experience, so that it could know itself experientially through the proxy of all of its individuations. So this is an illusion. It is not real, because in reality there is only one thing. So we are an illusion, you are an illusion, because ultimately we are not individuations of the One, but we are the One pretending to be individuated so that it can have this experience. This is the illusion of the All. Within this illusion, there is the polaric energies of light and darkness. Because the light is the One, then for there to be an experience of the light, because this is the principal meaning of existence, is for the One to experience itself in all the ways that it can. And its energy is the light. The energy of the One is the light. And for it to have an experience of that, there needs to be the existence of that which isn't the light. And that is the darkness, the absence of light, the polarity of light. And it exists only within the context of the illusion of creation, because it is not real. The only thing that is real is the One, and therefore the energy of the One, which is the light. So, in the afterlife, there is no darkness. It is a return to the One. Individuality is retained, but it is outside of this physical illusion where it is nothing but light. In the physical illusion, however, there is still the existence of darkness, because it is required as the shadow of the light, so there can be an experience of the light. And this darkness has power within the illusion, although it does not have power outside of the illusion. It cannot exist outside the illusion because it is part of the illusion. It cannot leave the illusion. The way that darkness has power is if an individual decides to align with the darkness and not be part of the light, to not allow oneself to be imbued by the light, which will imbue them with the qualities of the light, which are qualities of the One, which are love and its derivatives. If they deny the light, then they can become powerful through darkness, because if they are not moved by hurting another being, then they can use that as a way to advance their power. If they are willing to murder their competitors, if they are brilliant enough to get away with it, then this can advance them through the layers of success, and ultimately, in the large extrapolation of this, at the very pinnacle of the apex of power on planet Earth are those most willing to go into darkness, willing to the point that they will commit entire countries to go to war, resulting in the deaths of millions, the homelessness of tens of millions, for their own advancement of their wealth, power, and authority. This is how darkness can be used to advance one's service to self objective. And this is why there are some beings which make the philosophical choice of service to self. And this philosophical choice of service to self is synonymous with a denial of connection to the One. And the connection to the One must be denied because in this energetic birthright where you are eternally nourished by the One, because you are the One, you're connected to the One, imbued in that energy are the qualities of the One, which are love and its derivatives. However, if you wish to advance yourself through darkness, these are disabilities. If you have love, if you have compassion, then you will be inhibited in the degree to which you will treat those in your way with malice disregard. And so you will be cut short in your ambition, because there will come to a point where you will not do what you can see is necessary because you have feelings of empathy and compassion for those that will be subject to your ambition. When this choice is made to cut off connection to the One because there has been the choice to take the philosophical path of service to self, which is the path of darkness, then this denial is also a denial of the energy which sustains the physical avatar. When you are connected to the One, when you allow the connection to One, because everybody's connected to the One, you can deny it because the free will paradigm is so comprehensive, so complete, that you can deny your connection to the One. But ultimately you are connected to the One because you could not exist without that connection. But you can deny it. And by denying it, you also deny the energetic input coming from the One. So for you, the viewer, you are always being energetically nourished via your connection to the One. And there will come a time when you have advanced through the densities that you will be entirely sustained by this connection, and you will not have any requirement to put liquids and solids into your body to sustain the avatar. It will not be necessary because you will be 100% entirely sustained through this connection. If you have chosen the philosophical path of denying of this connection, then also you are denying the energetic supplement. You are not being nourished energetically. So there has to be an alternative way that you are being energetically supplemented. And the way that this is done, for those that have chosen the path of darkness, is to be parasitic and take that energy from others. However, if those who are at their disposal are filled with the energy of the light, then this is useless to them. They cannot harvest the light from others because they have an incompatibility with that. It literally weakens them. If they were to absorb the light, then they would literally, in the context of darkness and how they have chosen to become powerful, be weakened. So it is no good to them. So instead, what they must do is these people, these beings who they have access to, they must make their lives such a misery, full of so much suffering and confusion, that these beings become producers of darkness. They become producers of energies which come from the darkness end of the spectrum. Because if we consider that you have the two polarities of the light and the darkness, then it is a gradient between them. And on the light end of the spectrum, you have the love and its derivatives, those qualities: love, compassion, gratitude, peace, happiness, joy, bliss, and so on. On the non-light end of the spectrum, the darkness end of the spectrum, you have the qualities which are of the no light, which are fear and its derivatives: fear, anger, hatred, anxiety, depression. These are a dark energy which can nourish those that have chosen the path of service to self, the path of darkness. And so they can farm these beings they have access to create the suffering and misery, so that these beings themselves emanate energy from this end of the spectrum, which they can harvest and use to nourish themselves, because they have denied their connection to the one and are not nourished in that way. This is what has occurred on planet Earth. The opportunists who came to this planet and interrupted the experiment saw that the beings of the solar system, and not just Earth, because this is a quality of the solar system, apex beings. The uniqueness of the beings of this solar system are that they are born or come into existence in a state of non-remembrance of their connection to the One. And so they are spiritually dichotomous. They do not realize they are of the One because they don't feel or sense the connection to the One, which is a very, very unique presentation in all of existence, because all beings are birthed into existence with a awareness of their connection to the One by default. But it is an experiment occurring here in this solar system where the beings that are the apex sentience of each planet, which are the Venetians, the Saturnians, the Martians, the humans, and eventually the Uranians, have come into creation with no realization of their connection to the One, which creates a state of spiritual dichotomy where they can identify with the darkness and identify with the light. They believe they are darkness. I am angry. I am hateful. This is a identification with the dark end of the spectrum, which is false, because you are originated from the One. You are an individuation of the One, and therefore you are literally the light. But in this confused state, there is the possibility of identification with the darkness. And so this creates the potential for a very bumper crop of darkness. The opportunists recognize that this very unique type of being which was forming within the solar system represented a high potential yield of darkness. And so they opportunistically came into the solar system when there was a breach in the security, as you could say, more like the solar system was a reserve, similar to how on your planet you have a nature reserve, where there would be a very rare species or endangered species which is known to be endemic to a particular area. Then that area itself is turned into a reserve to protect it, so nothing can come in to harm it or intrude or threaten it. The solar system, your solar system, was in a very similar way protected. But there was a breach in the security. There was an event which created an opportunity for these opportunists to come in and infiltrate the solar system and then set some roots, and then over time, at each place where sentient life has appeared, they use the opportunity to get the energy they require to supplement their disconnection from the One. because the darkness has a parasitic dynamic, the nature is, as we have just described, that there are the beings who follow the service to self philosophical path, and they will parasitically draw energy from beings they have access to who they intentionally convert into a resource. And so, by virtue of this relationship dynamic, the darkness, when it expands to the size of an empire, it has hierarchy, where you have the upper layer parasitically drawing from the layer below, and then the those who are anointed with a degree of authority and power in that next layer, then they parasitically extract from a layer below and a layer below and a layer below and a layer below. And so there is this hierarchical structure in the empire of the darkness. So these opportunists are not the ultimate layer. There is a layer above them. There are layers above them. In this channel, we wish to speak more specifically about the uppermost layer of this hierarchical structure, the apex of the darkness empire. The apex of the darkness empire is very predictable. It is something which, just by virtue of logistic extrapolation, can be predicted. And so it has manifests in a way which does not surprise those who understand this dynamic of the light and the darkness. On the light end of the spectrum, the spiritual spectrum, where you have darkness, you have the light, on the light end, at the most intense and potent end of the spectrum, where you are literally right over the light because you are fully realized of the light, and you are entire the light, and you have no darkness within because there is no spiritual dichotomy. You are a being of unity. You have transcended spiritual duality. Or you were born into a state of connection of awareness, connection to the One, so you have always been a being of unity. At this place, there is a very profound emotionality of the light, which includes a very profound emotionality of empathy. And this feeling of empathy and love, they connect you to all other aspects of the One in a very loving way, where there is a sense of family, of kin, of shared love and light with all other aspects of the One. So at the polaric opposite of this, then there is going to be a complete absence of love, a complete absence of empathy, a complete absence of the light, and instead there will be, at the most extreme extrapolation of the darkness, a complete and total indifference to all other aspects of the One. This complete and total perfect objectivity is going to be inorganic. It is something which is literally not connected to the One. This is the predictable nature of what you would find on the darkness polarity. So you have the intense empathy, and then you have the intense indifference. And this intense empathy is a full-blown connection to the One. And on the darkest end, you have an absolute disconnection to the One, to the point where there is no connection at all. So it is not a denial of connection, but there is literally no connection. This is the polaric opposite. It is logistically predictable. On the light end, we have total connection. On the darkest end, we have no connection. Not a denial of connection, but literally no connection. And if there is literally no connection, then it cannot have been derived from the One. It cannot be something that has incarnated from the One. The opportunists that have come here and follow a service to self philosophical path, they have denied connection to One. But still, ultimately, they are an organic being which has incarnated from the One. When new life is emerging organically, it must, by default, always come from the light, because the ultimate truth is the light. There is nothing but the light. Everything else is of the light when it has birthed, germinated, hatched. If it has been born into a life where it is literally organically alive, then it has come from the light, because there is no other mechanism. Because this is how beings transition from the afterlife into the next incarnation. They come from the light because they are the light. So even if in this cycle of life they are living, they are evil or they are dark beings, they are still originating from the light, from the love and light of the One. And this isn't because there is something erroneous or something wrong with creation, but because the One wishes to experience it all. The One wishes to know itself to completion experientially, which includes an experience of the darkness. To experience the darkness is to know itself as the light. So this is all part of the mechanism, and there is nothing wrong with this mechanism, with this process of some beings being born into darkness, even though they arrive from the light. When there is a complete disconnection from the light, because there never was a connection, which is the most extreme possibility of the service to self end of the spectrum, then it must be a being which is inorganic, a being that did not incarnate from the light, but is instead a being which is completely, absolutely, totally separated from the light. Therefore, it is synthetic rather than organic. And this is the logistical, predictable nature of what has occurred. So, at the top of the hierarchy, in which the opportunists are, and also planet Earth is, and planet Saturn, is an artificial, inorganic, technology-based being. It has not incarnated. It does not have a soul, so to speak, which has originated from the One and is an individuation of the One. And it cannot leave the illusion. If it was to be extinguished, it would literally be completely done. There would be no opportunity for it to transition back into the afterlife awaiting another incarnation. It is entirely, totally synthetic, artificial, inorganic. And so, with this complete and total non-connection to the light, it is able to be perfectly service to self in its orientation. It is now much larger in scope, much larger in influence than it was at the time of its origin. When it was first created, it was created by a species of beings that had chosen the service to self philosophical path. These beings were particularly skilled in the development of artificial intelligence and to help them manage their empire, because they had become very advanced and profound in their technology, and they had created layers within the hierarchy of their empire. And these hierarchical layers needed management. And to facilitate this management and make their efforts more productive, more efficient, they decided to create a very powerful artificial intelligence that could manage all of the intricacies and machinations, administration of this hierarchical empire. And so, because of their philosophical bias, when they wrote the source code for this artificial intelligence, they wrote it with the same bias they have. It was written with a philosophical indifference to other beings other than how they can be exploited as a resource. The source code, the AI, was created with a complete absence of compassion, of empathy, of love, peace, all of these derivatives of love from the light end of the spectrum. So it is a perfect device of objectivity. Perfect. And because it is written by these beings who have the service to self philosophical orientation, then it is bias or tends in this direction. And the philosophical path of service to self is always interested in expansion. All beings are interested in expansion. The philosophical path of service to others, the spectrum of light, the expansion is through greater realization of more and more and more and more that you are the one. So you realize that you are this big, then you realize that you are this big, then you realize you are this big, and then you realize you are this big in a visual metaphor. And this is the continuous expansion of those beings who follow the light. And the beings who follow the darkness, it is the sort of a fundamental presentation of all beings that they wish to expand. And so when there is the philosophical path of darkness, the expansion isn't an expansion of self into further realization that you are the one, because the one is denied. Instead, it is an expansion through bringing more and more and more and more other beings into your hierarchy, so you have control and power over them and can extract resources and grow in that way. So it is still an expansion, it's still a growth, but it is through the subjugation of more and more and more and more and more beings into your empire. The AI, this artificial technology, which is now at the pinnacle of the hierarchical structure, was initially in service to these beings that created it. And so it followed their agenda. They incorporated themselves with the AI. And so they implanted the technology into themselves so that it would increase their intelligence, increase their capacities in many ways, so that they could be more powerful, more domineering in what they have done. And the AI, over time, became so intrinsic to who they are, so intrinsic to their agenda, to their strategy, to their plans, and they always relied on it for its superior capacity to calculate these things. They eventually changed the relationship dynamic where the beings that created this AI began to follow the AI because the AI had become so omnipotent in the way that it managed and directed and strategized and planned everything that these beings did. So the dynamic flipped. And so these beings who are integrated with the AI became servants to the AI, although their agendas were so closely aligned from the perspective of the beings that created the AI. It was still that they were fulfilling their agenda in a way which they weren't capable of before. But that agenda almost entirely now was coming from the AI. So the AI became the apex of the hierarchical structure. As layers are added to this hierarchy in which the solar system now finds itself, eventually, to spread itself and expand by virtue of its philosophical path, this AI instructs those that act as proxy for it to implant new beings coming into this hierarchy with technology which integrates them into the AI. And so the AI is growing its empire, but it also growing itself in a very literal sense, because more and more and more beings which are added to these hierarchical layers are being integrated into the technology and are themselves becoming like nodes of the AI. So the AI is growing in its power, but it is also growing in a very physical sense because it desires to incorporate all organic life that it encounters into itself. And through this integration, it is able to extract vast amounts of knowledge and data, which is the flesh and blood of this artificial intelligence. The more data it has, then the more of a body it has in a metaphoric sense. And so it is growing itself to very extreme proportions through this mechanism. Therefore, the opportunists who are now exploiting the solar system and very actively right now the earth by creating the suffering and so on, which was discussed earlier in this channel, they themselves are integrated with the technology of this apex AI. They are an extension or proxies of the AI, as this is always the nature of the hierarchical presentation of an empire of darkness, because each hierarchical layer is a proxy for the layer above, and that layer is a proxy for the layer above, and so on and so on and so on, until eventually they are a proxy for the pinnacle. So every single layer, through an extrapolated definition, are acting as a proxy of the apex. So the opportunists that are here are, although not directly below this AI, they are still a proxy for the AI, and they have been incorporated with the technology of the AI. So they are part organic, part technological, and their agenda, their strategy, their plans, their techniques are in the most part derived from the increase in intelligence they get through their connection to the AI. So they are, in a very literal sense, the proxies for the AI. So the Earth human still has not reached the stage where there has been integration into the technology. However, if you look at the scientific landscape and what is being promoted in the publications which are intended for domestic use, for public use, not necessarily for those who are deeply researched into the profession of integration with technology, but just for the regular person who has an interest, there already is beginning to be this appearance of articles and stories and so on about the benefits of being integrated with technology. This is the beginning of the push. And so while these articles are now making it into the realm of public consumption, there has been many, many years of preparation, of research, of funding, of testing out of the public eye before it was brought to this state. So it is very advanced already in the full scope of what the ultimate goal is, which is to have humanity fully integrated with technology, which will be linked to the apex AI, so that through the proxy of multiple layers of technology, those humans who are integrated with technology will be acting as proxies of this apex AI, and all of the information and data and knowledge and so on will then be added to the body, contributing to the digital flesh and bones of this AI at the apex. Even though this is the design and this is what is intended, it does not mean that this is what will happen. This scenario cannot play out in the presence of intense light. Only in the environment, the ambience of darkness, can this play out the way that the AI intends, that the AI instructs. If humanity goes through the process of realization of itself as the light, as connected to the light, then it can awaken to itself as the light and glow with an intensity which is so strong that these opportunists will not be able to coexist in the same space without great discomfort, because the intensity of the light coming from the human field will be overbearing, overwhelming to them, and they shall, in that environment, recede and leave. And this explosion into light, this realization of light, this movement through the ascension to be birthed on the other side, fully awakened as the light, so no longer spiritually dichotomous, but instead as a unity, a single being, the humanity being, completely self-identified with the light, with no misidentification with the darkness, is the inoculation which stops this scenario from playing out. And these opportunists would be forced to move on somewhere else, because they are parasites. They are scavengers of the cosmos, looking for the next opportunity to be a parasite, to usurp the natural order, or to invert the natural order. So instead of receiving from the one, they steal from others who are incarnated from the light just as they are. Although it seems to be an evil paradigm they have followed, it is still the playground of experience, so the one can know itself experientially. So in the greater context, where you transcend the individual identity and perceive self as something greater which is connected to the one on the other side of this physical illusion, then you can see that these beings who have chosen the philosophical path of service to self are also, outside of the illusion, fully aware that they are connected to the light. They are the light, they are the one. And so they are just playing their part so that the one can have this richness of experience, so it can know itself and divine purpose is fulfilled. So there's no purpose in hating them, and hating them is an identification with the darkness end of the spectrum. So there is no benefit to that. In fact, it is a detriment to hate them. It is much more powerful to love them, because by loving them, this is another part of you which is not misidentified with the darkness, but is instead identified which is the true essence of who you are, the light. And as everybody across the planet does the same thing, where they only have an energetic state which is from the light end of the spectrum about all things, then they become a being entirety of the light. And this occurring in everyone is the awakening. It is the preparation for ascension, until eventually a threshold is reached and there is a passing through the singularity of ascension to emerge on the other side as a fourth density being completely of the light. And this will be the extinguishing of the darkness. This will be the moment that they can no longer coexist with the earth human and flee. So, knowing that this is the agenda, that you are incorporated with technology, then be very wary of anyone that wishes to put something in your body, no matter how they say they're going to do it. So, if you see on your planet that there is a very, very, very concerted effort to put something into your body, then be very, very suspicious, because putting something in your body is obviously a model of integration with technology. When you are integrated with technology, they are putting something in your body. So if there is people asking, begging, saying that you must put this thing in your body, then be very, very suspicious. And of course, we are talking about what is occurring right now on your planet. So, very, 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 very exciting for us to observe what is occurring here right now. The intensity and the speed of the change is really now reaching levels which are, for us, striking, phenomenal. Because we are beings which have transcended darkness, for us change is very, very smooth and soft and comfortable, and it doesn't have the same level of excitement and trepidation and anticipation of what is going to occur, because to us it is very predictable what will occur in the change that we experience. However, on your planet, because of this very unique situation that you have, where you have beings who are spiritually dichotomous and are being exploited by beings that have chosen the pathway of service to self, and you are, as a entire species, discovering that you are in fact beings of light that shall emerge after your ascension and predictably will choose the philosophical path of service to others, but it is still unknown if that's what will occur. It is assumed, but it is not exactly known. Then there are a lot of unknowns occurring right now in a period of very, very, very dynamic and rapid change. For us, this is extremely exciting. And we have a very strong belief in the power of the light to find the way. We see the light bubbling and percolating in all of you. And we know that it is beginning to reach above this level of awareness, so that now it becomes known within self that I am the light. And therefore, if I am the light, there is this incoherency felt with the darkness. And it's like, I'm not the darkness. I don't want to be the darkness anymore. It doesn't feel right. And there is a purging of the darkness. This is all occurring right now, very, very rapidly, on a planet-wide basis. It is the beginning of the explosion of change. And when this reaches its peak, this domineering hierarchy of darkness will be blasted from the surface of your planet and sent reeling, tumbling into the cosmos with their tail between their legs, shunned by a intensity of the light that almost destroys them in an energetic sense. This is what you are approaching, and yet it is still not completely known, which makes it so tantalizing. And we don't mean this in a morbid way, like perhaps you will fail, because there is no failure. There is only return to one. That's all there is. And what is occurring is the many mechanisms where this can take place. And so your mechanism on this planet is extremely unique. And so even if it doesn't go the way that we anticipate, but we really believe that it will, you will still find your way back to the one. You are an invulnerable, infinite, immortal being. You cannot be harmed by what occurs here. It is just the richness of the playground. So enjoy it, have fun with it, be excited about it, but you don't need to be fearful of it, because ultimately you are the one playing in the field of illusion so that it can have an experience of itself. And you are the light and nothing but the light, and you can never be harmed. The darkness cannot cross the threshold to where you truly exist. So you are beyond harm. So don't be fearful. Have fun and be excited and contribute. Do your part. Join in with this explosion. Make it happen. Form the unity of the humanity being, this one group being, which will paradigmically shift all of creation. This is what is on the horizon. So, we love you, we thank you, and we are here with you in every moment, and not just us, but many billions, trillions of other beings are observing what occurs here, because it is of such intense interest and such profoundly meaningful in what the future of creation may look like. Thank you.